Good morning, Crossing Church family. How's everybody doing this morning? Everybody awake and ready? Yeah? My name is Jai. I am the student pastor here on staff at the Crossing, and we've been in this series called It's Just a Phase, and really trying to get everybody on board and honed in before we move into the future on this one main idea, right? That every phase in life matters. Every phase in life matters, right? It doesn't matter if you're the newborn in the church. You could be over there in the nursery, or it could be in here still. Or it doesn't matter if you're the toddler learning to walk. It doesn't matter if you're the adolescent going into middle school and high school and college, or if you're going out to the workforce, or single, or married, or finishing well. It doesn't matter what phase of life you're in, that every single one of you matter to God, and every single one of you matter to the church. And so we want to make sure that we get that across, that every phase in life matters. So last week I talked about the kiddo phase. And so if you have kids, or if you love kiddos, or even if you don't, if you missed it, you can go back onto the app and watch last week's message and get caught up with that. But this week, if we're progressing in the years, so if I talked about the kiddo phase last week, what do you think this week's is? The adolescent phase, right? So here's actually our generations. And so when some of you said teenagers, we're actually in a different phase, that teenagers aren't adolescents. Or they are adolescents. They're just not the only ones in that phase. Actually, adolescence is the age of 12 to 25. The human brain is not fully developed until you're 25 years old. So here's the different generation breakdowns. And most people think that we're talking about millennials. And the adolescent phase is not millennials anymore. Actually, they are Generation Z, which means basically they're the first generation that not only are they playing on technology, but their parents are playing on technology while they're playing on technology, and it just keeps growing from there, all right? So we are talking about the adolescent phase of life, and the adolescence is the phase, right, where we reaffirm what we believe, right? Raise your hand if you have ever looked at 12 to 25-year-olds and said, have you lost your mind, right? Raise your hand if you were the 12 to 25-year-old and somebody said that to you. All right, so there's a few of you. Right? What were you thinking when you did that? What were you thinking when you didn't do that? And guess what? They have lost their minds. That is a part of the process. And we can look at it like this, right? Like when you're a kid, life is pretty easy. Here's kid Jai. All right, so when you're a kid, life is pretty easy, and you're learning lots of things, and it's pretty basic. You make some good decisions. You have some beliefs and things, but it's like your parents and your teachers and the adults in your life are teaching you like very basic things, right? Like they're teaching you the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s, and then those things begin to grow. Like beyond God loves you, it's, look, we need to talk kind to others. We need to give forgiveness, and those things that you're teaching them just continue to be able to grow and get a little more in depth. Because what's happening in the life of a kiddo, in the brain of a kiddo, you've got all these neurons, and there are so many more than what we really need, but we're soaking up all this information. We're going, why? Right back to the why phase. And so they're soaking up all that information. And then comes along the adolescent phase of life, right? And then please nobody take a picture of this. Oh. Now, I realize if there's any teenagers in the room, right, that's not cool today. That's what we called the bowl cut. And your parents paid somebody to put a salad bowl in your head and then literally cut your hair, all right? It was scary. It's sad. So that's the bowl cut. The adolescent phase of life. In the adolescent phase of life, though, your prefrontal cortex of your brain is beginning to go under some serious construction. That part that determines your personality and the decision process that you go through and all the decisions that you make in life, it is growing and changing, and so many things are going through your brain, and you begin to lose your mind. And so we might be willing to go back and live the kiddo phase. Anybody willing to go back and live the adolescent phase of life? Like, not many people are willing to go back there, but it's such an important phase. Again, because in the adolescent phase is where we reaffirm what we believe. We reaffirm what we believe. See, because what's happening is you begin this transfer of information between, you want to take what's going from a kiddo's brain to an adolescent brain to eventually an adult brain, right? But they have to go through the transformation process. And so you begin to do that. You go from the kiddo brain, you're trying to transfer this information down in there, and some of them get lost in the process. And it gets messy, and it's not easy. But it's super important, because what happens then is these things become more concrete in the adolescent phase. The things you learn, the things you believe, and your behaviors. And so when you become an adult, it's not impossible, but it's a lot harder to change, right? It's not impossible, but it's harder, because these things have become more concrete inside of you as an adolescent. And so we are going to be in the book of Acts chapter 20. And in that story, we see this incident with a young man. But up to this point, Paul is traveling around, and he's teaching, and he's gathering up all the Christians in different communities and starting to grow the church. In Acts chapter 20, verse 7, it says this. It says, on the first day of the week, we came together to break bread. So they're doing church, taking communion together. And it says, so Paul spoke to the people, and because he intended to leave the next day, he kept on talking until midnight. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to that church and had that preacher, right, where you could literally leave, go eat lunch, and come back, and he's still teaching. Like, Paul apparently was that guy. In verse 8, it says this. It says, there were many lamps in the upstairs room where they were meeting. And seated in a window was a young man named Eutychus. So they're doing church. And where do we find the youth group? Seated in the back of the room, right? Seated in the window, doing whatever they do. Maybe they were dropping water balloons out on as people walked in the church. I don't know, playing Nerf wars. Most of them, to be honest with you, are probably doing this today. Just scrolling through their phones. Like I'd probably be standing right there next to them. But it doesn't matter, right? It really doesn't matter what they're doing, because we can't afford to miss this phase of their life. It's so important for us to tune in and engage in this phase of life. So who are they? Like last week, I walked through a bunch of the different phases that the little kiddos go through. So who are our adolescents? I'm going to walk us through some of those phases they'd be in there. Who are the students that are over in the student building meeting right now? Who are those kids? So here's some of the phases, right? If you remember last week, I talked about that there is 936 weeks between birth and graduation in high school. All right, so we need to pay attention. You're going to see some of those numbers decrease as we talk this morning. So here's the 6th grade phase, right? The phase when there's never enough groceries, too many hormones, and a dramatic kid that needs someone to prove who cares. Now this might be one of the most drastic changing phases that we go through is in the 6th grade phase, because you still have some 6th graders that are sleeping with like teddy bears, and other ones that are sleeping with iPhones, like complete polar opposites. Or you may have some teenagers, or in this phase, the 6th grade phase, that they're growing like maybe an inch. And then others that grew like a foot. Like that was me. I've been this tall since 6th grade. Like crazy, scared people. I played on every all-star basketball team you could get in 6th and 7th grade, but then quit by 10th grade because I never grew. And everybody else grew. They wanted to make me from a center into a point guard. And I'm like, I can't even dribble the ball. Like it just didn't work. So that's the 6th grade phase. The 7th and 8th grade phase. The phase when nothing you do is cool. Everything is fun in a crowd, and one smart kid will keep reminding you, yeah, I know. Some of you are having those conversations right now. Yeah, I know, right? And the game has totally changed for parenting in this phase, because back whenever I was a kid, if my parents weren't cool, it was because they drove a lame car. You remember that. Like you did not want to show up in your parents' lame car when you're being dropped off the movies with your friends. It's changed because they're seeing what you post about them on social media. And so you want the chance to blow up your house? Just put something embarrassing about them on social media. Like that's how the parent game has changed. It was cute when you put a kid picture about them on there. Now they're going to kill you. If you depending on what you put on their social media, it may not go over so well. I'm just saying people would be a lot more careful. The ninth grade phase, the phase when friendships shift, grades count, and interests change so often, your teenager has to explain to you, this is me now. Now, Mom, I realize that you thought that she liked cute Justin Bieber haircut guy so-and-so, but he is so last week now. Like that's how fast it's changing. It just keeps changing faster and faster. And like so, when you thought you were going to go out and buy them that gift you thought of 6 months ago, you may want to reaffirm that they actually like whatever you were going to go buy them. Because again, they change so fast in the ninth grade phase. The 10th grade phase, the sophomores. The phrase when everyone else can, nobody else has to, and your resolute teen will push you to answer, why not? See, this is the phase whenever they're getting their driver's license for most of them, right? And they're feeling that little bit of freedom, and they come to you, you're like, Mom, can I go do this? And you're like, no. They're like, why not? I don't know, but you're not going. Like that's just what you're going through. They want to go out and do all these things and getting a little too brave maybe in some areas. And they're like, why not? It's not happening. The juniors, the 11th grade phase. The phase when there's less drama, more stress, and your very busy teenager answers all your questions with, just trust me. Busy is an understatement for the juniors. In the junior year of life, they are so busy, constantly go, doing this, signing up for this, signing up for that. And they're constantly doing all these things. But here's this phase of life, I'm just telling you, working in student ministry for 17 years, and your junior year, they're so impressive. And if you'll give them the chance, they will impress you. In fact, we've got a junior teaching over in the student ministry right now. I'm telling you, give them some leadership. Tell them how much you see that potential inside of them. And they will impress you because there's so many things going on that they can do in their junior year of life. Then we've got the seniors back there, right? The 12th grade phase, the phase when your emerging adult pulls away, gets closer, does things for the last time, and you both start asking, what's next? Now, let's be honest, at this point, your kid's not a kid anymore until they want their laundry done. And then they pull that kid card back out. But I really need you to hone in on what's going to go on in this phase, because this is going to lead us to kind of the tension that we're going to begin to talk about. Have we prepared them for what's next? Have we really prepared them for what's next? And this is what the story, I'll pick up back on our story, right? After Acts 20, verse 9, he says, seated in the window was a young man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep as Paul talked on and on. He's doing all these. Right? He's got the head bob going. Paul can see him. He's watching. But now as a student pastor, though, Paul had one quality that I'm really glad that I don't have, or at least I hope I don't have. And watch what happens next. It says, when he was sound asleep, he fell to the ground from the third-story window and was picked up dead. Like, Paul killed teenagers when he preached. See, for me, that's like a student pastor career ender right there. I can imagine me preaching over in the student ministry, like John 3:16, for God so loved the world. Oh, man, Nick just choked on a donut and died. Like, that just doesn't go over well, right? Like, I can imagine my resume, right? If they got on the resume, Jai had 28 saves and 12 kills. You're not going to hire that guy, right? You're just not going to do it. And so Paul is preaching, and the youth ministry is in the back, and because the church as a whole is not paying attention, a teenager falls out of a window and dies. And I'm just telling you today that if the church and the adults don't start paying attention to our young people, we're going to have a lot more young people falling out of windows and dying. We've got to pay attention to our youth. This phase in their life, we cannot afford to miss it. They are so important. I don't care how messy it gets. They've got to know that the church cares about them. And here's what we also have to know. They're not the church of tomorrow. They're the church of today. Like, raise your hand if you gave your life to Christ before the age of 25. Look around. That's how important it is. It's the ripest field on earth. Verse 10, it says, Paul went down, threw himself on the young man, and put his arms around him and said, "Don't be alarmed," he said. "He's alive." And if you're a visitor, you're going, "We ain't coming back to this church no more. Like, this is weird. There's so much stuff going on. Verse 11, he says, "Then he went upstairs again and broke bread and ate. And after talking until daylight, he left. And the people took the young man home alive and were greatly comforted." And the church staff is just hoping they come back for a second visit, right? It's awkward. Here's the deal. From the day they're born, you're packing their bags to leave. And for all you parents of little young ones, don't cry on me now. I've got 2 second graders, so I know what it feels like. That's the truth. From the day they are born, we are packing their bags to leave. Because one day they will leave. You hope so, right? That's the goal. The goal is not to raise kids. The goal is to raise adults. And they're going to leave. So we have to make sure that we have their bags packed up. But the problem is we begin to live in this tension, right? Where we're packing their suitcase, where we're packing their bags, we begin to live in the tension of protecting our kids and preparing them for what's next. And we have to live in the middle of that. It's hard to both prepare your kid and protect them at the same time. It's not easy. The summer of 2001, when I graduated high school, this movie was released that kind of humorously catches this family living in the middle of this tension. And, well, there was one mom that kind of had a solution. Let's see what her solution is. Go ahead and play this video clip for them.
It's hard to show the world what you're made of when you're allergic to just about everything. Hands, scissors, grass, even my parents. And then I met Chloe. But she's about to marry the wrong man.
You know, Mark, well, the wedding's this Saturday in Niagara Falls.
And I have to stop her. So now, I'm gonna go out into the world and win her back. And nothing is gonna stand in my way.
This is awesome!
It's his first time out in the world.
The girl I love is getting married, and I have to stop the wedding.
That's so beautiful. I too once loved another.
You did?
And with a little help from his new friends, he just might find a way
This is awesome!
to make his dreams come true.
You didn't get out of that bubble room to play it safe, did you?
Yeah! Woo!
Go for it.
This is great! Whoa, I like the look of this! You want $500? And I want $500! $500! $500! $500!
Bubble Boy.
I'm not ashamed to say I liked that movie. I like the slapstick comedy stuff. It gets me. But we live, right? You can see how that's one result that we do with this tension, right? And because the problem that we really have with this is it's hard to shift from being someone who's protecting a newborn to someone who's preparing an adolescent. It's hard to make that shift. It's two totally different ways of thinking. So we have to live in that tension, and that's exactly what some of us do. When we get into that, we want to pull a bubble boy and begin to wrap our kid up. And that's one solution for us, and we begin to protect and protect and protect and protect to the extreme, right? That's what we want to do. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. That's the heart of a parent, right? A heart of a grandparent. We want to protect them to the extreme. But this is what Tim Elmore says. He says, we have to prepare the child for the path, not the path for the child. He's basically saying, hey, guess what? Whenever you begin to go into full-on protection mode and we wrap your adolescent up in a plastic bag, what happens? You wrap up the bag that you're trying to prepare for them as well. And you don't give them the experiences that they need because we've got them wrapped up in a bubble. They don't learn the life skills they need because we've done it for them. They don't learn how to handle hardship because we've sheltered them. They don't learn how to take calculated risks while they're under our roof. And so we have to get to the point where we're going to take the bubble off, right? We have to take it off, because this is what King Solomon says in Proverbs 22:6. It says, train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now, the common misunderstanding that we have with that is we read that as if it's a promise from God, and all of a sudden we're like, what happened, God? My high schooler went crazy and did something, like they're going, what were you thinking? Or they went off to college and they went nuts. Like, what happened, God? Because I did what I thought I was supposed to do. I prepared them. But you're taking out of context, one, the fact Proverbs wasn't written to be a book of promises. It's a book of wisdom. And what Solomon is saying there, he says, hey, if you will pack their bag, if you will prepare them, it'll be a lot more likely that things will go well with them, that they won't depart from the path. But you can't take out free will. And so what are we going to do? We've got to do everything we can, at least on ourselves, to show up and say, hey, I've done what I'm supposed to do, and we're going to pack their bags. That's what we have to do for the next generation, for our adults. We're going to pack their bags. And so the first thing is very basic. We have to pack up their life skills, right? There are just things in life that they need to know basic skills apart. Like, they need to know the difference between a debit card and a credit card. They've seen you just stick it inside of a machine, and if they don't know the difference when they get to college, that's going to create a whole lot of problems. They need to know the difference between a debit card and a credit card. Like, and it may be different. Life skills may be totally different for them than it was for you. What you needed to know before you went off into college or you went out into the working world, it may have been different for you than what it is for them, right? For me, I needed to know how to change a flat tire. Today, you could probably just give them a AAA card. So you call this number, right? There's totally different skills that they need, though, so you have to be aware of what the skills are for them today. The second thing we need to pack up is we need to pack up some adversity, right? We need to pack up adversity for our kids. In 8th grade, I was given this position at our school as like student ambassador, which basically just means I think they saw that I played sports and had some kind of a leadership quality and needed to make sure I didn't get in trouble. So they called me a student ambassador for the school, and so they were basically like, hey, as an 8th grader, we want you to go and talk to the 6th graders as they prepare for junior high. We didn't have middle school. It was kindergarten through 6th grade was still elementary school. So like, hey, go talk to the 6th graders. So I went and talked to the upcoming group of 6th graders, and I knew, though, that I was going to miss this biology test, but I was like, okay, they're like, you're okay, you'll be able to take it later and make it up. So I went and I talked to the 6th graders and went home and went to bed and got back up the next day to go to school and take my test. And so I was in the hallway taking my biology test, and one of my friends is walking past me as I'm taking the test, and they look at me and they're like, oh, man, your test looks so much harder than ours was. And I was like, okay, well, that's strange. Well, I didn't do well on the test, of course. So I went home did what any junior higher would do. What do you do? Complain to your parents, right? Come on, mom and dad, like, you need to do something about this, right? Parents, you've done this, right? Like, I want them to step in, and they're like, well, okay, what's going to happen is tomorrow you're going to go in and you're going to ask to talk to your advisor and your teacher, and you're going to talk to them about what happened. That was not the answer I wanted, right? Like, I'm like, no, you go up there and blow up some stuff and make people happy and give me a better grade, right? That's what we think should happen. And that's not what happened. So the next day I was like, okay. So I went in and I got my advisor and my teacher together, and I kind of, hey, I had this kid walk by, say, my test looked a lot harder than theirs, like what's going on with that? And sure enough, the teacher did. He thought I had skipped class, that I'd skipped the test, and so he gave me a harder test. And so the advisor confirms that, hey, he wasn't skipping class, like he was doing what the school had asked him to do. Will you allow him to retake the correct test? And I did, and I got a better grade, but you want to know what I learned in the middle of that situation? It had nothing to do with about getting a better grade. I learned that when, guess what, some hard times come, that I can't always run to mommy and daddy. They're not going to solve all my problems. There's going to come a time in life when they're going to go through something really hard, and guess what? They need to be able to address some of their own problems. They need to be able to handle a little bit of adversity. This is what Paul writes in Romans 5:3-4. It says, we can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they help us develop endurance. And endurance develops strength of character, and character strengthens our confident hope in salvation. We can't wait to develop that later. They need to struggle and see adversity and things that are going on in their life right now, because guess what? If we start to begin to raise fragile kids, we're going to end up with fragile adults. At some point, we have to start preparing and stop protecting so much. So pack up some adversity. The next one is pack up diversity. Right? Now, I realize this is not everybody's story, right? But I grew up in a small town of white people. And that's all I had at my school. And finally, in junior high, we had one black kid that moved into our school. And that was my diversity in life. And so my parents probably had to be super nervous, but decided to take me to Mexico on a missions trip as a 13-year-old. All right, I'm sure they were a little nervous about that, because I would definitely say I had lost my mind by 13. And so they're taking me to Mexico, but here's the thing. When I went to the conference, and I was 17 years old, and I decided to give my life to Christ and go into ministry, 17-year-old Jai needed 13-year-old Jai to go on that trip. I needed the diversity that brought, because I saw things in Mexico. I saw people living in cardboard box villages, and it opened my eyes. I had 13-year-old Jai having conversations with adults, and adults were telling me, man, you are really good with kids. Have you ever noticed that? 17-year-old Jai needed those experiences. So don't wait. Don't wait to pack up some diversity into their lives. They need to experience. It doesn't have to be on a missions trip, but they need to experience diversity. And not later, but now. Here's the next one. We need to pack up not only IQ, but some EQ. So studies are showing that we have increased the pressure on grades so much on our adolescents that the stress levels are off the charts. And emotionally, they're struggling to handle it. And so while we can pack up, how to write a paper, and we can pack up how to take calculus and all that crazy stuff, right? But if we don't prepare them emotionally to be able to handle life, they're not fully mature yet. They need to be able to handle their emotions. This is what Proverbs 25:28, Solomon writes. He says, a person without self-control is like a city with broken down walls. Basically saying it's a hot mess. Not in a good place, right? They're in ruins. See, they have to emotionally be able to handle when somebody stabs them in the back. They have to emotionally be able to handle when they have this serious relationship and they get dumped. We have to pack up some emotional stability for our kids and talk them through the emotions that they're going through and why they're there, that God will use those emotions for a reason. So pack up the book smarts, but man, pack up the emotional stability for them as well. And here's the last one. Pack up their faith. I can't tell you how many families I see that push pause on their faith in the adolescent phase. And here's the deal. When they graduate and go out into the real world and go into college and go into work, they need their faith. They don't need mom and dad's faith anymore. It needs to be theirs. They need to own it and make the decisions and know what they believe and why they believe it. Because guess what? When they go off to college, there's going to be a professor that is going to continue to poke holes and poke holes in the Bible and poke holes in their faith. And they need to be strong enough not to be able to answer every single question under the sun, because that's not their job. That's like trying to defend a lion. God doesn't need somebody to defend him. But they, in their own minds, they need to know why. Why do I believe this? And what do I believe? Because they're going to experience hard things in life, and they need to process through that through a filter of their own faith, because it's theirs. If I can say anything to this morning, if you work with adolescents, if you teach adolescents, if you're parenting an adolescent right now, I could say one thing to you that I could hope would stick. Don't quit. Don't quit. Like this, I realize there may be some messiness that comes along with this phase, but it's so important. It's so important. Don't quit on them. They've had so many people already quit them and fail them and walk away and see the mess and say, I don't want any part of that. I pray if anything I can get through that God will tell you, don't quit on them. They need you and they matter. Let's pray. Father, this morning, Father, I know that this is my passion about this age group. But Father, I pray that it overflows and spills onto everybody in here this morning, that they would have a broken heart for those that are in the adolescent phase of life, those 12 to 25-year-olds that are in this room, that are not in this room. Because Father, I know that you have major plans for the students in this room. But you're not going to wait to use them. You're using them now. Father, I pray for our adolescents that as they go into their schools and as they see the stress and the mess and all the stuff that's going in, Father, I pray that you would use them to be a light in a dark place. But Father, anybody who's in here, again, who's working with an adolescent, Father, I pray for patience, endurance. I pray that you would break their heart for them. To be able to look them in the eye and say, I won't quit. I won't leave you. Because God, I know that you're not leaving them. So let us be your example for you and not leave them. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So this morning, if you are a parent specifically, I'm the student pastor, so if you're a parent specifically right now of a 5th grader through 12th grader, you may want to get out your phone. I'm going to run through a few things. Rarely do I have an audience that is like, I'm talking all about student ministry, all about that adolescent phase. So here's some ways that we want to communicate with you. If you take your phone out, you can actually text at CSM Parent 1 to that phone number, and that will get you into our mass text, so I can let you know when events are coming up, when sign-ups are, and all that kind of extra stuff, like when something's getting canceled. But that's our way to communicate, and there's also a couple other things we do. For those of you parents, you're probably doing social media like I am. So there's a Facebook group that is mainly let you know what we taught on Sunday morning, all that kind of stuff. But then there's also, for you students in here, we have our Instagram, Tribe CSM. And you parents, that's for students, but you can feel free to peek in. All right, we'll let you. But there's that kind of stuff is out there on social media. If you have a kid in the adolescent phase right now, 12 to 25-year-olds, or especially our student ministry, man, I encourage you to get them involved. There are going to be things that we talk about over there that you may never talk about over here because they're in their own unique phase of life. But if you're a student in here, though, and you never come over to the student ministry, I want you to hear my heart. It won't change how I see you. It won't make me love you any less. It won't make me care for you any less. Like if you or your parent will let us know what's going on in your life, even if you never come over there, we'll show up for you. Because that's what matters. That's what a church does. So this morning as we kind of go through here's some of our summer trips coming up. So that's CIY Mix for our middle school and CIY Move for our high school, just some summer dates out there so you guys know. But for you parents in the room, this is the big one. I was on this launch team for this book called Growing With. And it is specifically for those adolescent parents, the 12 to 25-year-olds. If you're parenting one of those right now, this book is phenomenal. It has so many strategies, so many ways. But the main premise behind it, you need to know, is it's not that they're growing up. It's that you have to grow with them. We have to change. We have to grow as they're growing, even as parents. So I encourage you to go get that book. But for the rest of you in the room, this morning, maybe when I talked about the adolescent phase, you realize that there's something in your life that's still concreted in from those years. Something that's been hurting you, something you've been carrying around. Maybe something happened to you in your adolescent phase of life, and maybe you've never made the decision to follow Christ for yourself. Or maybe it's stunted your spiritual growth. You haven't been able to connect with God like you know you could be able to because of things that went on when you were younger. Remember, I said it's really hard to change when you become an adult. But what I'm asking you to do this morning, I'm asking you to allow God to get out the sledgehammer and do what he does best and bust up the concrete. Because, man, he loves you. And he wants to continue to grow you and change the things that are going on inside of you to look more like him, more like his son. So this morning, if that is you, if you want to accept him for the first time, you can come forward and you can be baptized. Or if you've already made that decision and you've got the mess going on, you need to talk with somebody and people at the crosses, and you can come forward and pray as they sing. If you need to make any of those decisions this morning, and just come forward as they sing.